All right, welcome back to the Contrarians, folks. I've got a special edition today. We have a friend of the channel, Tim, with us. Welcome, Tim. How you doing?
Hey, Marco, welcome back from Paris.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I was on vacation for a little while there and had an amazing trip in France, Paris. So that was awesome. Thanks for asking.
Now he can reference the Street Heart album, Meanwhile Back in Paris.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, Tim. This is actually like a special episode. We are talking to Tim today. I just want to welcome Tim, and I'm under the understanding that Tim's book, Unspooled, which I actually have a physical copy of, which is an excellent book. It's one of the best books I've ever read about 8-track collecting, and it's a great music book. There's a lot of amazing images in there, and there's a lot of things that I personally learned from the book. There's also a little article that I have in there as well, which is really cool. So thank you, Tim, for including me in your book. But this book has been out for a while now, but it's been out of print for a while now as well. So this has not been available in physical form until, from what I understand, just recently. And we've brought Tim back on the show because of the high quality standard of the book and like the amazing content that Tim provides for our show and Tim's own show, Tim's Vinyl Confessions, which I would encourage folks to go check out and follow if you get a chance as well, if you love music discussion and collectibles and things like that. But Tim, welcome back to the show, and why don't you give us an update on your excellent book, Unspooled?
Thank you very much, Marco. I love how you preface that. It's the best book on 8-track collecting I've ever read. It's probably the only one. So I'm top of the file. Yeah, no, it's originally, as a lot of people know, we did this as a Kickstarter campaign, a very successful one. Then I still had a lot of people emailing me about getting the book, so ordered some more books. Like this is, you had to order so many books, right? And so it's the challenge of getting rid of them all and packing them up and shipping them out. But yeah, within the last few weeks, thanks in no small part to, I got to shout out my buddy Matt Phillips from Go North Design, because I mean, he designed the book, but he also had to work on it again to make it fit the Amazon format. And I also want to thank Julian Gill from, Kiss FAQ, and well-known author of some awesome Kiss books and Aerosmith books. And people know who Julian Gill is. So he was really helpful in the formatting, because it's called Amazon KDP, but it's basically a print on demand service. And, we kept running into roadblocks submitting the finished book as it was, and it was just getting rejected. And Matt couldn't figure out what was going on. I sure couldn't figure out what was going on. So Julian was like, it was just a little bit of formatting issues in this. And I have to say that for print on demand, we were kind of concerned that maybe the quality wouldn't be quite up to speed, because the first edition of the book looks so cool, looks so glossy, and the graphics just pop out. And this came out really well. So I have the copy I have here is a proof copy. This is, I've got a copy that, to look through and see what it would look like. It's just got this watermark around the book. The rest of the book looks like how it will look, if somebody buys it. So let me just, just because he was kind enough to do this on the fly, let me just flip over to the section that Marco wrote, which is titled All Shook Up. And it's a story about how he had some 8 tracks, now he doesn't. But yeah, it's just one of the examples of people that were generous enough to contribute their talents to this book. Give you an example of the graphics here. This is just a collage of 8 tracks from my own collection. I'm sure people look at that long enough, they'll say, oh yeah, I recognize this album and that album and that album. And oh, I didn't know that album was on 8-track, which is part of the goal of this. Of course, our fellow contrarian Martin Popoff contributed the foreword, which was fantastic. Mentioned Julian Gill. He contributed a great chapter on Kiss collecting, because there's no one crazier than a Kiss collector. Ryan Murphy from Rush Fans, who's also been on the Contrarians, contributed a chapter. And I guess I did a little bit of writing too. But basically, I still haven't figured out a way, Marco, to sum the book up in a nutshell, because if people just think it's all about 8 tracks, it's really not. It's really about music collecting. It's just that 8-track is the format that I felt wasn't getting served. There's lots of books on vinyl collecting. It's never been cool to collect 8 tracks, but it's just another audio format. And, I'm particularly, of course, fascinated by the 8 tracks that the record clubs provided almost all the way through the 1980s, all the way through 1988. I wanted to chronicle the ones that are confirmed to exist, which is some pretty surprising ones.
It's
But
incredible.
there's also some collecting stories in here, and like I said, every page, there's, pretty much every page, there's graphics that are just really eye popping. Just to give you an example of some of the late '80s tape tracks I'm talking
about. The color
about.
photos are fantastic.
Yeah, and those all translate very well in this new version too, I have to say. So the second edition, other than the fact that it's never been available on Amazon before, it is a second edition. We get a little banner here advertising it as such. But the main difference is that since the first one got printed, I discovered about 24 more 8-track titles, confirmed 8-track titles to exist. Those have been added to the year-end lists. It goes from 1981 to 1988, and also there were a couple that I removed from the 1982 list because I was informed that they are not RCOs, that there were retail versions of them, so that doesn't fit the quota anymore. So those were removed. So it's
even doing your homework.
Yeah, I never stopped gathering information, because I always kind of had it in the back of my head. It would be nice to make it available again. I didn't think it would happen, but I'm really pleased with the way it's worked out, and I really like how it was a real concern. I didn't want the colors to look, all flat and lifeless, and they don't. They look really, really good. I'm really impressed with it. Like I think it's a tiny bit smaller because there's not as much room at the top of the pages, but everything's there. Everything that I wanted to be there is there. And if you missed out on it first time around, now you can order it at your leisure. So I really appreciate the people that have obviously everyone that ordered it first time around. I've been selling a few since it's only been a few weeks since it's been made available again, and I'm just talking about it a little bit at a time. So the fact that it's now something that people, should they decide they want to get it, it's no longer a limited thing. I mean, that first edition is a limited thing. You've got a first edition of something that's never going to be around again. The copies that exist of those are all that there will ever be. But the second edition is it's out there. And like I said, it's not that different. It's just a little bit up to date. And one of the chapters I had to rewrite a little bit. Other than that, it's the same book. And another difference is that it now has a link to my TeePublic merchandise, which Contrarians also uses, high quality stuff. But I don't want to sell too many things at once. But I did want to include that in case somebody gets into it and likes it. And one of the designs, of course, that is available is the cover to this book. So really happy with how it came out. It's been fun talking about it again. And again, I can only take so much credit. I did a little bit of typing. I had the concept, but I'm surrounded by good friends that just took it the rest of the way, either by doing the design work like Matt did, or contributing chapters like yourself, because it really filled out the book each year. So it's got like 8 main chapters, and they're broken up into 4 sub chapters. If you're talking in 8-track lingo, they're broken up into 4 programs. So it's a really, really cool book. If you like stories about collecting music, if you're a music collector, if you're a collector of any type, if you collect, baseball memorabilia, if you collect hockey cards, if you're a collector of like certain editions of books, you will find parallel stories in here to your own. But I know a lot of our audience here on the Contrarians, a lot of people supported the book first time around. So, and I really, really appreciate that. The thing that I would like, anyone that liked the book first time and got it, I don't expect people to go up and buy the second one too. But what I would like, if people,
some crazy collectors out there, Tim.
Yeah, I gotta send a good shout out to my buddy Mike Ladano. We all know Mike. He went and bought another copy. He was the first copy sold. So that's really cool. But anyone who did like the book, even if you don't feel the need to order the second one, if you could go on Amazon and leave a review, that would really help me. And, that doesn't cost a thing, but if you could leave a little review about it, that would be great. That just helps the rating of the book. The other thing is that, yes, it's Amazon, whatever country you call home, wherever you order from on Amazon, you should find it just by typing in Unspooled and my name, Tim Durling. Unspooled should bring this rate up. There are a few other things that come up. There's a movie podcast with that name. Yeah, Marco's going to show you so what you're looking at here, this is the Canadian page with the Canadian price. I'm told it comes 3-4 days, like really, really quick. So yeah, so there you go.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was a trip to see it on Amazon. It looks so official, and we got a description of it there. And like Amazon does, you can flip through the book. Like, it's got the look inside feature. So yeah, it's real easy to get a taste for what it's about. If you're not sure what it's about, if you're like 8-tracks, I've never owned an 8-track in my life, doesn't matter. I think you'll find something to like here. If you like classic rock, particularly 70s, 80s stuff, see, I mean, look at that. That's
beautiful.
A lot of vintage album covers there that just happen to be on this, obscure, old timey format.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting facts in the book, a lot of things that I learned, a lot of things that are conversation starters. You know what I mean? Like things like, did you know 8-tracks were still around in like the late 80s and things like that? There was a lot of cool information in the book. So it's available now on Amazon. You can order this today.
Yes. Yeah, and depending on where you are, you'll have it within a few days. And I'm really glad for that opportunity that we have it available again. Yeah, there's a chapter in there about how they actually worked, how the players worked. So I learned stuff there. I never really understood, for one thing, I never really understood why they were called 8-tracks. Also, as you see Marco flipping through there, there's pictures of me throughout the 80s. So, it's a trip through the 80s. In the introduction to each of the chapters, there's a little bit of autobiographical stuff, but not too much, because who cares about me? I'm not, but there is a little bit of stuff.
Yeah,
I hope people find endearing.
Your personality's in the book,
relatable.
but I think
it talks about how I
thing.
really got interested in music seriously and ended up with, wanting to find, look behind me, wanting to find like the albums that I love in as many formats as possible. And that just happens to include 8-tracks. Yeah, I said this to someone once. It isn't so much that I want to collect 8-tracks. I want the albums I love in as many formats as I can find. And when I find out that albums that were released in 86, 87, 88 that I like on 8-track, I said, well, I got to try and find it, So, and I have found a few more since, since I put the first book out, ones that I needed to get pictures sent in. I mean, this is one of my favorites right here. 5150, that completes my Van Halen 8-track collection. That was the last one I needed. So yeah, give you an example. Like, some people might be going, I didn't know that was on 8-track. There you go. That's it. Hopefully this can serve a purpose as a reference guide that someone can look up if they're curious. A coffee table book. It's not necessarily a book you have to pick up and read from cover to cover. You can kind of flip through it, pick it up anywhere. And I've also, I've heard it called a good bathroom reader, and I take that as a compliment. I honestly take that as a compliment, because those books that end up, in people's bathrooms, those are books that get read over and over and over again. So I'm happy to contribute. Yes. If you want to add to your bathroom decor, folks, Unspooled. But yeah, I'm really proud of the book. I'm really, proud of the work that people have put into it, and I really appreciate all the, the guest contributors like yourself. Like Martin, like Julian, like Mike Ladano. It's been quite a ride, but now that it's on Amazon, yes, full disclosure. I mean, you're not going to get rich off doing books, as anyone will tell you, but and your return on book sales from Amazon isn't what they would be. But there's no shipping. Don't have to traipse over to the post office with boxes of books. Don't have to make sure that they're packaged really well. We had a couple that we didn't package quite as well, and they got dinged up, so that, then we had to ship replacements. And so this is like one click and it's all taken care of. So Absolutely. I'm really happy that it's available again, and I'm happy I was able to get it through Amazon.
Yeah, and like what I find fascinating and I appreciate is how this has kind of become like a bit of a living document. Like, you're doing your due diligence, you're like keeping this high standard. Like, do you plan on future updates and future additions to this book? Like, are you going to keep continuing to add to it?
I mean, if we do really, really well with this, maybe. I don't know if I have anything more to add other than discovering more titles. I think one thing that might do it, one thing that I still would have loved to have been able to do is talk to someone who worked at Columbia House or worked at RCA Music Service to see what they remember about the whole process of, why did you continue to make titles available on 8-track past 1982 when they disappeared from the retail stores? Why did you go all the way until 1988 still making a lot of titles available, especially after 1986 once CDs entered the mix, because CDs became available in Columbia House. I'm talking about Columbia House in the US, by the way. But so from 86 to 88, you had 4 choices. That's a lot. It's a lot of inventory. Every format is mastered differently. You can't take the vinyl master and transfer it onto a cassette. You can't take the CD master and use it for 8 tracks. Of course, the 8 tracks had to be broken up into the 4 programs. So sometimes they had to split songs and add songs and take them out of order. So I'd love to talk to someone and find out what was the decision making behind why did you decide to keep making them, and why did you finally stop? I'm guessing they finally stopped because the demand just wasn't there anymore. But if I was able to talk to someone like that, and or if I discovered maybe 50 more titles that are confirmed that existed, that might be a reason to do a 3rd edition. But
or even a sequel.
Or even a sequel, yeah. But then I'd have to come up with some more content. You never know. I do have, I've talked to a few people about this. I do have another little germ of a book idea, but I don't really want to talk about it because it's way, 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 way in the future. But I like the fact that I can look at this and say, as far as I know, everything that's in here is 100% accurate, or at least it's my opinion. But those year-end lists that list the titles, I didn't put those in there on spec. I didn't put those on there because I read somewhere somebody said, I'm pretty sure I saw that in 8-track. These are confirmed to exist.
Yeah, and even like what I appreciate about the book as well is like this is like a contribution like to music history as well as like 8-track history. So like if you're interested in 8 tracks and things like that, like, and you folks have seen you on the show before, like people know how knowledgeable you are about music and like how well spoken you are, and your personality is in here. But if you like Tim and you're interested in 8 tracks and collecting, like you cannot lose if you pick up this book. Like this is like a win-win basically. And you can see the level of dedication that Tim puts into the book by adding and taking away, and you know what I mean? Like that's just incredible to hear that. This is an actual contribution to 8-track collecting. And I think you've done like a fantastic job. Like I would totally encourage anybody to go to the Amazon page, order a physical copy if you don't have it, leave a review if you do have it already. I think that's also a great way that you can pay a tribute to Tim, who's doing something that like uncovering things that not a lot of people are doing this. So like this could become a lost media, and people like Tim and doing stuff like this helps keep it alive. I don't know if you agree with that or...
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really wanted to create the book that I just wanted to have. I always wished that there had been a book that chronicled this. There are books on 8-track collecting, but they tend to concentrate on the 70s because people think that this is a 70s medium. I wanted people to realize that, yeah, that was the heyday of it. And that's certainly the ones that you see out, the thrift stores and whatnot. But 1988, this is a real thing. And it's, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully explain why I'm so fascinated by it. I just, they don't belong, these iconic 80s albums and album covers, to see them, put onto these this old format with the songs split up. And it's just strange to me. And I wanted to document it. And I looked all over the internet. I couldn't find anything like this. And most things are just one Google search away, but this isn't. So I'm hoping now, if people are like, I wonder what 8 tracks exist from the 80s. I don't know if there'll ever be a complete, I don't know if this will ever be a completely definitive thing. I don't know how you'd ever know, like I said, unless I talked to someone that worked at one of these places. But this is to the best of my ability. This is a good start. This is a really good start. You can see trends. You can see how it peaked around 1985. By the time you get to 1988, it's a very, very short list. But they're out there. They're not easy to find. There are some that are high in demand, and most people, that watch our show that are interested in hard rock and metal, you'd be surprised at some of the bands that do have albums on 8-track, and you'd be probably shocked at the prices that these go for when they do come up for sale. It's usually always a bidding war, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And it's because there's so few of them. Even a really, really popular album, that tens of millions of people bought around the world, they didn't buy it on 8-track. So when you get something like Motley Crue Shout at the Devil, or Rat Invasion of Your Privacy, you're going to pay big bucks for them. And and that also leads in it, you got to watch out for counterfeits, you got to watch out for fakes. So due diligence. I do talk about that in the book. I also talk about how to get started with an 8-track collection.
Well, even reprints are kind of coming back into the market. So now you're seeing old albums kind of get redone on 8-track, like at least specifically with custom people are kind of going and doing like.
Yeah, and if they're customized and they're made, if it's explicit that like, hey, this is just something fun I wanted to do, I'm not making any money off this, that's one thing. But people are also making them to look like they were legitimately from back in the day. That's the ones you got to look for. Yeah. If something looks like this, it's probably not a counterfeit. That's well weathered. I'm guessing this was in somebody's back window. This has seen some sunlight. But if something looks too perfect, just gotta be careful.
How weathered is too weathered for you? Like, would you not buy an 8-track you don't have because it's so like out there, the quality?
It depends. It depends on the rarity. If I came across a copy of, let's say, Rush Power Windows, which is the only Rush one I don't have, and it was really, really beaten up, but it was $50, I would probably buy it just to have like a placeholder, but I'd still be on the lookout for a better copy. I've shared this story with people before, and I'm not making this up in the least. I was chatting with someone. I've met a lot of cool people through a Facebook page called 8-Track Fixation, which I do have to shout out. They were an important source of information for this book. But I chatted with someone who had, believe it or not, the first Bon Jovi album on 8-track. Yes, folks, there is a Bon Jovi 8-track. And they wanted to sell one. And they sent me a picture of the front of it. Oh, that looks like it's in good shape. Had a little crack down the middle, which happens sometimes. You get that little, I don't know what you'd call it, but there's a little raised thing that happens in the middle sometimes. And they said $350. And I go, oh, wow. Man. I said, man, I'll have to, but we're talking ultra rare. And then he said, oh, by the way, it doesn't have the back label on it, which means it would look like this. It looks like this. It's got that blue border around it, like most of the Columbia House ones did. So it had that sticker on it with the front cover, but it was missing the whole back and side. And I said, well, no, I'm really not interested in, I'm not paying $300.
Incomplete copies. Yeah.
Incomplete copy. I'm not saying it was a fake, but I'm like, I'm not paying $350 because, you stack them and it's just blank. Yeah, no, I couldn't bring myself to do it. So he saved me money there by showing me what the back of it looked like. Oh, I'd have been mad if I'd have paid for that and said, where's the back of there? Where's the rest of it? But anyway, that it probably wasn't an outrageous price to ask because of the rarity. Anyone that collects if we're getting into heavier stuff, anybody that's an Iron Maiden fan might be surprised to know that the first 3 Iron Maiden albums came out on 8-track in the US on Capitol. They're not even RCOs because they were retail ones. Those ones go for big bucks because number one, you got 8-track collectors, and number two, you got Iron Maiden collectors. So, and Kiss collectors, that's a whole other story because the ones that are really, really hard to find are from the Elder, like the Elder I have, Creatures of the Night I don't. That was the last retail one, but then Lick It Up and Animalize were available through Columbia House. And because Kiss collectors are crazy, those can go for many hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, and there's also some odd instances where, like, for a band, an album chronologically came out on 8-track, the next one didn't, but the next one did. Isn't there
exactly
instances like that?
Exactly. And and I don't have any of these. I wish I did. But Rat, you can get the Rat EP from 1983 on 8-track. Well, you can get it. It exists. I'm not saying you can get it. Get it if you can find it. And Invasion of Your Privacy from 85 exists. But the big one out of the cellar from 84 doesn't seem to. Now, I'm using my words doesn't seem to, because to this date, I've not seen any evidence of it, and I need evidence to put it in the list. Doesn't seem to make any sense. And then there's other bands very similar from that era that just don't have any. I've never seen a Twisted Sister 8-track, even though, they, like Rat, they were on Atlantic Records. They sold millions of albums, but there's been none of their albums seem to have been released on 8-track.
Those are some good questions to ask somebody who's in the know.
Yeah. That could be management of the band saying, we don't want our albums on 8-track. But then again, there's other, why is there a Motley Crue one? Like, why is Shout at the Devil out there? It's very, very strange. So,
are there 8-track singles?
There's one that I know of. And it's actually past the purview of this book. And I didn't include it because it is a single, and it would have been like, it's the only one I know of. But it's actually a Canadian band, the band The Pursuit of Happiness, put up their single She's So Young in 1989 as an 8-track single. I don't know how it was available. I don't know if it was only Columbia House. I'm thinking it was. And I think they did it more of a, as a talking point. But yeah, that's the only one I know of. But yeah, there is at least one.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know like Martin with his initial book about heavy metal vinyl collecting, he only included like EPs or full albums. He didn't include singles in that book because that would have been like a whole nother, you know what I mean? Like,
well, the funny thing is about it, and there's a chapter in the book about that. Like, if you because I worked in radio starting in the early 90s, and I worked at a small AM station where not everything was digitized. So this picture, which formed the basis for the front cover, I actually own this. I actually, found this at my old radio station. That's a cart,
nice.
Which is essentially an 8-track, but you can see through it. So you can see kind of the innards of it. And it doesn't have as much, this one doesn't have as much tape on it as a full album would, but there were old songs that were on cart. They were recorded from vinyl onto this cart. And, but there were also ones that had very little tape in them that we used for commercials, 30-second commercials, or 5-second station liners. They could be used over and over and over again. And you would just, we'd have a big, called a bulk eraser. It was like a clothes iron shaped thing with a button on it. It was basically a giant magnet, and you'd hold the 8-track, press a button, it would hum, and you'd go through all sides, and it would erase the tape so you could use it again. So that technology, that continuous loop technology, was used a lot in radio, and even past the era of selling 8-tracks in stores, even though they're essentially the same thing.
Oh, you can watch like episodes of Frasier from the 90s where he was working in the radio station, and they're still using 8-tracks. It's fascinating.
Oh yeah,
I've picked up on
anything
that.
Anything set back in that time period. I'm sure if you watched old episodes of WKRP too, you'd see these racks that have these tapes in them. Those are carts. You could put they'd have stops on them. They'd have stop points if they worked correctly. So you could have 10 station liners that were different, and as you played them, it would just advance to the next one. I remember using them. I remember thinking, that's weird. I didn't know. And that was an education for me. So when I found that and I was working on this book, I'm like, I got to find some way to incorporate that in there to just show people that continuous loop technology, which is different than an audio cassette, but the continuous loop format was used longer than 8-tracks were around.
Yeah, just a quick question, just because I'm curious about some of the 8-tracks that came out in that RCO era, like the mid to late 80s. How different was the music from the album that came out on 8-track in that period, and then when it came out like on vinyl or CD, even at that point, right? Like, is the music different? Are songs omitted? Or is the production different? Is it mixed differently?
Well, I mean,
like how different would it be?
They'd use a different mastering technique for every format, because they had to. Every format had its unique capabilities, but nothing omitted, I don't think. But I think that what you would find is oftentimes they had to rearrange the song order to make all 4 programs about the same length. Now, I've been told, because as I talk about, I don't actually play these, I don't have a player to play them, that the quality went down because they're just less demand for them. So I don't know of any that had songs omitted. I do know that there were a few. This is more of a 70s thing where there were extra parts of songs that were added to keep the length about the same. Pink Floyd fans know about that, diehards. I think there's some Beatles albums that are like that. But no, I just think that the overall quality kind of went down, just like the quality of vinyl went down by the late 80s. They were using thinner and thinner vinyl and cutting costs.
Very cool. Well, as you can see, folks, Tim has a lot of passion on the subject. Obviously, Tim knows what he's talking about. This is an excellent contribution to 8-track collecting and to just music fascination in general. I want to thank you, Tim, for coming on the channel. In the link, you will find, or sorry, in the description, you will find a link to the Amazon page. You can open it. If you happen to be on Amazon, you can take a Google or search for Tim's name or the name of the book, and I'm sure it'll pop up, but the link will be in the description. And any final words, Tim, before we go?
I just appreciate everyone that supported the book, and I appreciate the chance to come on and talk about it and promote it. So thanks, Marco, for doing this.
Absolutely.
Last minute notice, by the way, folks. This happened very quickly.
Yeah, was not prepared to be on TV today, so it took a little bit of setup time, but we figured it out. And any chance that I get to help somebody who's helped the channel, or any chance I get to help promote something that's of this quality, like absolutely, I would love to help spread the word out, because it deserves to be spread out. And some of this stuff, you know, it's going to be lost if we don't continue to contribute, like have folks like Tim contribute to it. So anytime anybody's doing that for any genre of stuff, whether it's something I'm really interested or not, like I appreciate what Tim's doing here. Like I would appreciate anybody trying to preserve things that are important. And like, I think that this is important and it's fascinating. If you don't know anything about 8-tracks, it's fascinating. If you know about 8-tracks, this is a great piece to your collection, because the RCO thing I thought was fascinating and learning about it was great. And also Tim's personalities in the book too, and some other folks. And that doesn't hinder the book. That only helps it, because it adds another layer, makes it more of a 3D thing. And I appreciated the parts about Tim. And as you can see, Tim knows what he's talking about. So the more Tim, the better, I think. So on 8-tracks for sure. And whenever I see 8-tracks out in the wild, I always think my first thought is Tim. I always look at 8-tracks now. I'm more fascinated. I'm more interested in them.
Yeah, you sent me a couple, which is great. It's nice having people out looking for stuff for me.
Absolutely, because I want to, you know, also help out and contribute to the what you're doing with preserving this awesome history. So thanks, Tim. Link will be in the description. If you don't have the book, check it out. At least flip through the pages on Amazon. That's not going to hurt you. And go follow Tim's channel as well, Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Tim offers some amazing content. Tim's been doing it longer than we have. Like, Tim's been around. He's a great host, a great contributor to our channel, and he has his own great content. So I encourage you to follow Tim's channel. And for all of us at the Contrarians, I guess we'll see you next time.